So, I'm a father of an Asperger's child. This is my story. When it came to looking at the business of parenting, and when the subject came up internally for me, I looked back on my relationship with my own father, because that was about the only place I knew to look. And it was a model that I knew quite well, and seemed quite natural. And I can recall, in my early teen or late teen years and early young manish area, thinking about, someday I want to be a parent, and someday I want to have children, and I dreamed about having a son. And I was already in that stage taking note of what my father did. I became more aware of him as a man. And I made certain promises to myself, and I made mental notes about what was going on. And I'd like to think that by the time I was, in my around the 20-ish age, and thinking about the rest of my life, that I had a pretty good handle on this idea of parenting, being a father. And I see my father, and I did look at him and see how he handled situations in his life, and how he spoke to me, how he treated my brother and sister, and how he treated my mother. And from that, as we all do, I learned, like everybody else learns, how to become a man watching my father. He was a great role model for me. And I should pause here and talk about the role model that the fathers provide for the sons, and for the daughters also. Because in this work I've noticed that not every man has an ideal relationship with his father. Some are bad, some are good. And as a result of that, men make decisions one way or the other. And the decision goes something like this. This is what my father did to me. I will never do that to my son. Or my father was good at this, and that's what I will do. I want to have that same kind of relationship with my son. And I've spoken with a lot of men, and overwhelmingly it seems that a lot of men have had a bad experience with a father. And in that area, there's two things. One is a father that was absent or not present at all, or there was a father who treated them badly, or was perhaps even abusive. And there's a lot of that. And in there, the anger builds, and the rage in men starts. And the promises start about what you're going to do and what you're not going to do. It starts real early. And that gets laid in there pretty harshly. We don't talk about that. And it doesn't come out until you get angry, drunk, or in a very personal situation where you want to get it out. Sometimes you need somebody that you can speak to. Usually it becomes your life partner who gets to access all that information. So the women in the room here know what that's like, of downloading all that stuff, the anger that's in a man's life before you came along. And there's a peace that has to be found, otherwise they live in anger. And I must say, I feel like an exception to the rule, because my relationship with my father was actually quite good. I loved the man dearly and respected him till the day he died. And if there was anything, the promises I made, I wanted to be as good as he was. So that's how my story started. So by the time I was getting back to the 20-year-old, by the time I was in that age group, I thought I had fatherhood pretty well sussed out. After all, how hard can it be? You just walk around like a dad. Kids come up to you and say, yes, dad, no, dad, and everything works. Your wife loves you eternally. How hard can that be? It sounds pretty simple. And what do you... Okay. Then, yeah, I did get married. Yes, we did have a son. And guess what? Everything changed. And the learning has to start again. Because I discovered along the way that pretty much everything that I thought I knew was really of no use to me, and I was going to have to learn this all over again. But in the meantime, before I was going to get to that, I was going to try to fake it. If there was an issue here, well, I wasn't looking at it right away. I thought, this might just go away. This might be something that he grows out of. Maybe when he sees other kids in the playground, in kindy, that one child teaches another and they sort of learn how to do things. Or maybe it'll change in school. But as we all know, that doesn't happen. If we're going to be in this world with a different child, we're going to have different approaches, different skills. And those different skills aren't bad skills. They are more of the good skills that you've already got. So I had a journey here. I had to sort out what it meant to be a father when you have a child of difference. And I use the word difference because I hope that everybody's come to the realization of the language here that this is not about disability. That word doesn't belong in our vocabulary. And you'll see it. I'll get to that again later. We talk about difference. And it's only because this is not a medical condition we're talking about. There's nothing medically wrong here. This goes to the heart of behavior, which is wired deep in the DNA. And we all have different behaviors. And there's millions upon millions upon millions of different ways that people behave every day, all day long. This is just one particular strand of it. And there is a similarity in the differences. I think you understand what I'm talking about. So, from a father's point of view, you need to think about a new way of parenting. And initially, like in a lot of families, Sally was
predominantly the primary caregiver in our family. And the mother sort of gets there first because they're Johnny on the spot. I had a responsibility to continue to bring the bread home. And I thought that was pretty normal, pretty standard. And when something came up, some kind of learning, Sally took it on. She saw the speech therapist, all the pathologies, everything that we thought could fix this. Sally went there first. And if she went to a seminar or met somebody, I said, well, you go, find out what they said, and then you come home and tell me. And I wasn't as engaged in the process as she is. And now, many years later, she's doing this kind of work. But I'm talking about right there in the beginning. Before I realized that I needed to be engaged in this process also, I don't think I was. I was watching it as much as anybody else would watch it, hoping that something could change. Something along the line of growing out of it. Fighting the reality of what it was. About age 12, which would be whatever the year was, our son was officially diagnosed with Asperger's. And at that stage, the diagnosis came home, the reality really came home. While we kind of knew already, the diagnosis is like the marriage. Okay, I'm in love, but now it's for real. Same thing with the diagnosis. We know about it, but now it's for real. And there's two feelings. One is it's a relief to know. Second is you know that this is for life. Two things. And there's kind of polar opposites. One's good news, one's bad news. However you want to, whichever way you want to mix those up. But I'm sure that most parents can relate with the fact that the day of diagnosis, You remember what you were doing that day and how it impacted on your thinking, and things were never going to be the same again. And we all knew that. So I knew that I was into something. So I want to tell you a story that really jolted me. My work is, for the last 25 years, I've been a commercial real estate agent. And I had a client that I was having a coffee with, and we were chatting off the subject of real estate, and we got talking about our lives, etc. And I told him I had a son on the spectrum. To which he said, "Oh, and are you and your wife still together?" First question he asked. First comment that he made. And I was completely stopped. And I'm thinking, why would he ask that question? Where did that come from? You know, was there something? I wasn't talking about my relationship with my wife. I was talking about my child. So my answer was no. And why do you ask? His answer was, and he used the word disability in this sentence. He said, "Oh, well, because most parents who have a child with a disability break up." He used the word disability. He didn't know. That's okay. But what was he seeing that I wasn't seeing? What did he know that I didn't know? Did he know anything at all? We all have an opinion on that part. But it caused me to think about it for a long time. And I think it goes something like this. That when you have a family with somebody on the spectrum in the family, there is additional stress that's caused in the primary relationship that is coming from the parents. It would be nice if we could just blame it on the kids. But the kids aren't to blame. The stress starts in the parents. And it builds little by little. And it goes back into those early days when, I think this is something that he can grow out of. This might change later. There might be a cure out there that we haven't found yet. Let's scour the internet and find out everything we can about this. How many have done that? Looking at the internet, yeah. Trying to find an answers. Maybe there's a guy somewhere in South America that discovered a plant that, and on it goes. We chased down every guy that came along with an idea. We even had a guy that we went to, it was one of these psychic exhibits, and there was a guy in there that was releasing the eggs that were laid in the brains of children by aliens. And he said, "That's what you need." God bless him. But we looked at that. Is there something going on here that we have missed? And a lot of parents can identify with the search to try and find something, to try to find the magic cure. Well, if we can't find a cure, maybe we can fix it some other way. And here's where we shift gear into the men's world, into the hardware store, Bunnings area of life. If we could have our birthday parties at a Bunnings store, we'd all be happy. But men like to fix things. I'm a fixer. I can fix the garage door. I can fix a leaky faucet, a squeaky wheel. First, last, and always, I can fix it. That's what men do. Fathers do. We are the fixers. So here's something that's different, and it needs fixing. So if I can get my wife out of the way, let me at this. I'm going to fix it. I don't quite know what to do, but I'm going to fix it. So there's an attitude that develops in here. My defense against not knowing what to do is to try to fix it. Because that's where it started. I didn't know what to do, so I had to try and fix it. Because I didn't know what else to do. Fixing it sounds like the manly thing to do. Sounds like something that a father could come in and wave a hammer and it'll get fixed. So we started down this path. Well, maybe fixing it was just a matter of diet. We know that that's essential, but it doesn't change the real world in the end. Or maybe it's a pill from somebody that's peddling a medication. And we looked at that. And after a matter of weeks, said, no, this is dealing with symptoms. This is not dealing with cause. This is not a solution. It seemed that as you weed out all of the possibilities, you come to there is no place to go with this. There is nothing to fix. But the fixing, builds up the pressure. So here's where men, me, start to beat themselves up. If I can't do this, I'm not very good as a parent. Probably not very good as a man either. I can't do this, I can't do that. My relationship, well, what kind of relationship? The relationship I had with my father, I haven't been able to duplicate here because a whole bunch of things are missing. So, where to go? Where to go? I came to the realization, and it wasn't, a one-day aha moment. It was in this hopelessness and this slipping that I needed to do something. And I was smart enough to know that if the world was going to change, I was going to have to change. The thing is, I didn't know what to do about me. And one day, this is back in the 90s, I got involved in the men's movement. Now, I'm going to tell you the story about what went on here. And for the men in the room, this is not to say this is what you have to do, but this is one way of doing it. Because in the men's movement, which was quite ripe at the moment, at that time, men would go away on gatherings of 30, 40 guys into the bush, campfires, smoke, beat the drums, get angry. And there was a number of processes that went on, run around naked in the woods and all kinds of stuff. But there was some very deep and personal things that went on in these sessions. And it was there that I discovered the rage in men, other men and myself, and the anger that's there, and how it goes back into those early childhoods. And a lot of it had to do with the relationships with their fathers. And we need to deal with that sooner or later. Don't have to, but the sooner the better is the answer. And I discovered that in that process, that when the door opens for change, you need to go into it with the right attitude. That if you don't go into it with the right attitude, the change that's potentially there for you can get lost and you'll get burnt. So I'll tell you a story about what happened one night in one of these men's gatherings. This was this was an overnight camp. So during the afternoon, they said, tonight we're going to do a fire walk. Everybody's going to do it. Rather confronting, because that wasn't in the literature. And you're going to take your shoes off, walk barefoot across coals from here to the end of this room, roughly the distance that we had in mind. And they didn't give us an awful lot of warning before that, but the preparation started about midday. By 2 o'clock, they had a pile of wood from here to the end of the room, about a good meter high, maybe a meter and a half. And they lit it, and there was coals underneath. And about 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, this fire was started. And I have to tell you, it was a massive fire. And it burnt and burnt. And while that is all burning down into coals, we went through a number of processes. And all of it was to get your mind centered. You got to get past the guilt, the pain, the prejudices, the judgments, all that kind of stuff. And it was a pretty intense process. And the fear of being burnt was stronger than the fear of doing all this other stuff. And so we went through it. And I must say that there's sweat building up around most of these guys, myself included. We were scared. And by nightfall, it turned dark. It was a beautiful bed of coals. It just glowed that real color that you see glowing embers. And he said, okay, guys, line up. We had to line up. Now, at this stage, I just want to take you sideways for a second. There was 3 or 4 guys that were running this event. And there was a young man there, about 19. He was obviously an apprentice to running these kind of events. And he was running around telling mature men what to do. And you could sense that he didn't know what he was talking about because he's only 19. And rather cocky about the whole thing. But because he was part of the management, if you like, we all went along with whatever he said. But he wasn't on our side of the fence. In other words, he wasn't going to walk. So it's easy for you to say all this smart stuff. We're the ones that got to do it. So the night unfolded, everybody lined up, and you can imagine as it became your turn to step up to the fire, and you look down there and there's no way back and there's 30 guys watching you, you got to go. And you hope like hell you've done enough. And we walked, one after the other. Not a single man burnt his feet. It was an amazing feeling at the other end, because there was just this elation that you made it, and the joy and all the rest just poured out of each guy. And then they came to cheer on and help the others go through it. It was a massive experience. When all the guys had walked, the instructor came along and said, okay, we're going to walk too. 4 instructors, 3 men and a kid. Guess who burnt his feet? The young man did burn his feet, and quite severely. The lesson was, without doubt, nailed home. If you don't go into this with the right attitude, you will get burnt. And it applies to us where we live. It applies to us in the business of parenting here. When the door opens to go into it, to discover who you are, and to do your own self-work, you need to go into it with the right attitude. Otherwise, you will get burnt. So what constitutes the right attitude? What are we looking for? What's the journey about? We find that, most times when you tell men why things need to be done, you don't have to tell them how. They sort that out. In fact, most people operate that way. Why do you need to do this? You need to do it because of the anger that's residing, the fear that's residing, the pain that builds up. And it's the pain of not being able to act, not being able to deliver, not being able to create and to lead the path. So we step into these phony roles. The phony role of disciplinarian. Maybe that'll fix it. Boss. Don't talk back. They're phony roles. They are cover for what is real. Because what we're really striving for is communication, understanding, support and be supported. Those are the real words. And for us, why are we here in this in the first place? What is it that drives men at this point? It's for that longing for that peace that comes when you don't have that pain anymore. And it's easy when you start looking at this to say, well, let's fix these kids. Isn't that what is the real issue here? And of course, I'm here to tell you, it's not. The fixing is in here. Because the kids are running around having a life. The pain is in here. It is us that needs the healing. So the issue of changing and trying to fix, I want to tell you another story. And this one goes to the heart of how you cannot change certain things. When I got to the point of saying, I'm going to fix this, and had it firmly in my mind, I decided all these little things that didn't work, that I had a bulletproof plan. I had an idea that maybe nobody's tried this before. I had the ultimate weapon. If I can't get in there and fix it myself, what I'll do is I'll get my son to change him. I'll talk him into it and get it done from inside. Now, I figure I'm smart enough to do that. So, didn't quite know how I was going to go about that, but I had this as a formatted plan. So, you want to check the words out carefully, how this unfolded. So I got together with my son in the right setting, and I said, you know, this business of Asperger's, yeah? How would you like to get rid of that? Get out of that. Change your life and get rid of that. He didn't hesitate. He answered right back. Oh, change me, you mean? And I didn't even get to answer that. He said, I don't want to change me. I kind of like who I am. No, in fact, I don't want to change. I'm not going to change. I am me. I am quite happy with who I am. And in a heartbeat, I'd realized I'd already gone too far. So this is only for the men, okay? This is a bit like saying to your wife, we could have a really good relationship if you would just change. And of course you realize where that's going to go. Stop laughing, you girls. Yeah. The only way you're going to change is to change in here. You can't change anybody else, nor can you get them to change even with their permission. They're not going to. But it was a very tough lesson to learn that there was no way out of this. The answer had to come from inside me. So we come back to do the work. Do the personal work that is involved. And many men will have different ways of dealing with this. So it may start with a seminar, for example. It may start with reading a book. But wherever it starts, and it is a journey, and it goes on, and it's a deep one. And you'll need your partners with you to talk you through it. Because as you make a beachhead, what happens is the world gets to be a bit friendlier place to live in. And right here, we want to look for, well, where's the trigger in it? What's the key word? And I want to leave you with this word today, because if you remember nothing else, remember this one word. And the word is allow. 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 Now, it fits in a lot of places. But in the context of which we're talking here, this is what it looks like. I spent a lot of my time trying to lead my son down the path, trying to pull him in the direction I wanted. That when I decided to allow, I walked beside him. And in that context, once you allow, whole possibilities open up. You release that need to be the boss, need to be right, need to be a parent, need to be all these things that we force on ourselves. But really, all that we need to do is to allow. And the allow can be described as the business of supporting and being supported. Because after all, isn't that the way we want all of our relationships to work? To support and to be of support, to understand and to be understood. But it starts with the word allow, because in there is the release, is the letting go, which is hard for a lot of people, but it needs to start somewhere. And the word allow kind of kicks in. At one of the seminars we had, I had a guy came up to me afterwards and said, how do you get to that point allow? How do you get the patience for that? Anybody got any ideas? The answer is practice. It's like learning the piano. Practice, practice, practice. There is no alternative. We aren't necessarily born with this. We are born with the ability to do it, but we aren't necessarily born with the skill that comes of doing it. We have to just start. You just make up your mind and go. And as an example of this, I want to use a movie that you may have seen. Anybody seen Groundhog Day? Yeah. If you haven't seen the movie, it's been out for a number of years. Bill Murray was in it. It's also funny. But get the movie out and watch it from the standpoint now of the word allow and the situation that we're in with children on the spectrum. I'll give you just a quick overview of what the movie is. Basically, he wakes up every morning and relives the day, exactly what happened before, but he has the opportunity to use what he learned from the day before in this day, which is a bit like real life. You wake up every morning, you can use what you learned yesterday, and you add to the barrel of information. And he fought everything. He argued with everything. He tried to control everything in the beginning. And this is quite humorously demonstrated in the movie. And for those of you who've seen the complete movie, you see that as he moves through it and starts to allow and to release, that he does find some peace. The peace starts to move into his life. And in the end, love starts to flow. And of course, it's a love story, but at the end. And really, for us, it's exactly the same. You start with the word allow, and in there, you start to find the peace. And in the peace, the love will flow. And really, isn't that where we're all trying to get to? Isn't that the place where you want your relationships to sit? Is there anything different that you'd want to do differently because of a diagnosis? Yes, there's maybe a whole bunch of specific things out there, but really, the starting point for it, it still has to come from the point of love. And really, we just need to switch the dial maybe a quarter turn to the left, and you'll get that back. It isn't all the preconceived notions that we have about disability or non-functioning and all that kind of stuff. It really starts with allow and allowing, and then learning that process as you go. The business of being a father in this area means that if you're in a different situation, you're going to have to use a different set of rules. And maybe it just means that for all of us, we need to learn as much as we can about this autism spectrum. But we cannot do that learning without coming from the point of allow, peace, and love. Because that has to be there first. Otherwise, you get trapped in your own hardcore anger, disbelief, guilt, fear, all those ugly words. We get trapped in it. The simple way is to move out of that first. And you can deal with all those issues in time. But the easy thing for people to do, I use that word tentatively, is to move into the space of allow. Because you'll find that in your life, you're probably already doing it with certain people under certain circumstances, and you're very good at it. And there's a role there that you can copy. And you'll notice real quickly that just in the moment of allowing, that quick release, bang, you feel the peace. You know, you may not have it all, but you know that it's different than a fear-constricted situation, or one where you're angry or all those negative words are sitting. That peace changes everything. And once you get a bit of it, it's not hard to go and get some more of it. So I want to finish this portion of it and tell you about, as fathers, we need to do this work. We need to do this journey. And it doesn't happen overnight, naturally, but we need to start. You need to open the door to looking at what's going on, and then agree that if there's a change to happen, it's going to be me. I had to acknowledge that it was me that was going to change. I needed to put it on record. I told my wife I was going to do this, so then I couldn't back out of it. I made the promise to myself, but I also made it to her. When I went away to the men's weekends, and I did a number of them, they were with a certain attitude in mind that I had to find out who I was, what I was, get rid of the anger, get rid of the fear, and move through those things, and find the peace. Because we are totally debilitated when we're in those attitudes. When you are in a peaceful place, when you're in the flow of love around and people around you, there is nothing wrong. What you do is 100% correct all the time. Think of it. As a parent, as a partner, as a person in this, as a human being, when you are in a peaceful place, you are happy, and everything you do is right. You cannot do a wrong thing when you come from that place. It is, we're hardwired that way. So we have to get there. Make it a point to get there. Make it a journey to get there. Knowing as you go into it, you have to open the door for stuff to get out, stuff to be released. I'm not saying that is easy. There is a process to all that. Some of these things go back into people's childhood. Some of it is anger that we've inherited from generations of crap in our families and in our family trees. And it can get very complicated. But until you start, you don't know what you're dealing with. You're just dealing with the immediate fears and the guilts and the angers. And there is a lot of anger in a lot of men. And it's why you see in the pub next door on a Friday night, on a Saturday night, men punching it up. Because one drink, they drop into that and bang, out it comes. And there's no need for it. Okay? We need to start the work to do that. And for the men who are switching the dial and saying, yeah, I'm going to do that, I want to give you another reason for doing it. And it's like this, because everybody's watching. The man, they don't think of you as the primary care. Mom's doing all that. What is your role? You need to get to this place of no fear, no anger, and peace. Because then you are whole. You are the best version of you. And the other reason that we need to do this is because our children are watching. It doesn't matter what we say, they aren't going to necessarily learn by us telling them what to do. They will learn by watching us do what we do, how we act. That's how they learn. And I noticed earlier in the room, there was a majority of the kids on the spectrum were boys. So for men, teaching the boys how to become men is still our real role. Because they're on the spectrum doesn't change anything. They still are going to grow up and become men in this world. Most of them are going to have relationships, and most of them are probably going to have families. Now, the only thing stopping that is if we try to pass on our guilt, our shame, and our fear to them, they will struggle the same way. It is our job. The buck stops here. The buck stops now. We do not pass this on. There is no excuse. There is no right. There is no wrong. We just decided this is the end of it. I am the man that makes the difference in my genealogy. The DNA stops here. I'm breaking the pattern. It doesn't have to go any further than this. I will be the best parent that I can be. need to find the peace so I can operate from that place. And I know that once I'm in the peace, the love flows. And man, it's a give and take, and I feel better, and other people feel better to be around me. I need to do the work to get to that spot. And because everybody's watching, I think it is a noble cause. And I think it is a noble and honorable thing for men to do in this life, to live a life as a whole man for everybody that's in your life. Stand up, become engaged in your family, and become the role model that the boys need, the boys want. They are still looking, they are still watching. They need to see that kind of a person. They need to understand that they may have in their time to do some men's work also. They may discover, but that is their journey. Yours is to do yours now. Theirs is to do theirs then. We will be supportive and of support to get there. And everybody's different in what they need to do in their life. We all come here with a purpose. And they have a purpose, and it's probably 100% different than what ours is. But in the end, the things that they do want and they do need in their life is to be supported. They'll want relationships. They'll want family. And they'll want to do the best they can. So we need to provide the best model that we can. So gentlemen, I want to finish on that note. I want to acknowledge your coming today and acknowledge what goes on in the mind of men. And for the ladies, it's a bit of a peek into the kind of the stuff that's going on that maybe we don't talk about enough. And I'm fortunate to be past the age where my son is not so small anymore, and I've lived through it. And it's only in looking back that I'm old enough, mature enough to look back at it without pain and to be honest and open with you about it. But for those of you who are in the trenches now, I'm just pointing the direction. Allow, find the peace, find the love.